The first stage of peace talks, the U.S.-Russian meeting in Riyadh, has come to an end with no binding conclusions and with Russia rejecting the possibility of Western peacekeepers in Ukraine. What does Kyiv think about the negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine? To talk about it, we're joined by Dr. Tymofiy Mylovanov, advisor to the President of Ukraine. Good evening.
Good evening.
So what do you make of the Riyadh meeting?
There's no real conclusions. The parties agreed to continue to agree. In fact, that's not very different from the reality. You look at the statement by the White House, by the State Department, you will see that there are 4 points there, and one of them is to establish a delegation, the other one is to establish a mechanism. So basically, it's preliminary talks about possible talks.
Is Ukraine being updated? But is Ukraine being updated on their progress?
Yeah, I do not know. I think there are conversations at the top leadership level, but Ukraine is really hurting. I think that it's, there are conversations about Ukraine without Ukraine.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says that any deployment of NATO troops to Ukraine, even under a different flag, would be unacceptable to Moscow. Now, this is a very strong statement, sort of an ultimatum at the very beginning of peace negotiations. Now, if not by European NATO soldiers, do you think that Kyiv can accept any other way of providing it with security guarantees? Could Kyiv, for example, opt for a UN mission in Ukraine?
Well, so it depends on specifics of the mission. If the mission is going to be an observatory mission, we already have OBSC missions before. They didn't help to stop anything. We need security guarantees to make sure that Russia doesn't invade again. Or otherwise, let's just have a very frank conversation about this. This is not peace negotiations. This is a pause negotiation where Russia is able to restart the war at the time of its choosing. That's not what we want. That's not what's called peace.
So what should be the security guarantees, given the fact that Ukraine is very unlikely to join NATO anytime soon?
Troops, some variation of that, the weapons and financial support for defense industry.
I understand. President Zelensky says he will not accept any outcome of peace talks without Ukraine being involved. Now, do you know at what stage will Ukraine partake in them?
I have no idea, frankly. I don't think anyone knows when that might happen. But it must happen at some point because otherwise there is nothing to sign, right? Ukraine has to receive some documents, has to issue some proposals, has to ratify documents. In the end, we're a parliamentary republic. We have a parliament. It has to vote. It's not the 19th or 18th century where monarchs can decide how to corrupt Europe.
Some would say differently, especially now. What can Kyiv agree to? Now, I'm asking you about concessions because they will have to come at some point, definitely. President Zelensky says that Ukraine's territorial integrity is not negotiable. So what is there up to negotiations?
So Zelensky recently said that, of course, we cannot recognize formally the territories as Russians, and that is the case in many other conflicts. Look at Cyprus, for example. We realize the situation on the ground. There is de facto occupation, unless it is somehow agreed that which territories are exchanged or freed, then there's no, during the ceasefire or truce or peace, there's no fighting for those territories. So I think that is very understood very well by everyone. Similarly, that there's no appetite to admit Ukraine to NATO. It's basically Trump administration being honest and frank, unlike the Biden administration, and saying what the U.S. administrations have always meant since 2008, even before. No NATO in accepting Ukraine until and a list of conditions and unclear when. So these two conditions that Russia imposing, they are in fact reality on the ground. Now Russia is asking for a couple of more conditions to disarm Ukraine and not to give security guarantees, but also to give up some of the unoccupied territories. All of these three conditions basically are impossible for Ukraine to meet, simply because there is no mechanism to do that, there is no political will, and it will be a political death sentence for any president, not just Zelensky in Ukraine.
Now, what do you make of the American proposal to stop attacking Ukrainian and Russian energy infrastructure?
Yeah, we are being attacked. Actually, you might hear a sound outside. This is an air alert. Yesterday there were attacks, there were blackouts, the infrastructure being damaged. It's really very cynical and hypocritical of Lavrov today to say that we rejected that proposal by the U.S. to stop attacking energy infrastructure. Why? Because we never attack, we never jeopardize the civilian infrastructure. I can tell you as a citizen, as a human, as human being, that I see blackouts. I live through blackouts. I see explosions. People die around me in Kiev and elsewhere where I travel because Russians attack power plants, generating facility, transmission facility. That happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, today, the U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg, paid a visit to Warsaw and met with the Polish president ahead of his planned trip to Kiev, ahead of Kellogg's planned trip to Kiev. Now, what role do you see for Poland after some sort of peace is obtained? Well, Warsaw is, as we already know, reluctant to send its troops to Ukraine.
Yes, but at the same time, Poland has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine. We face a common enemy. We share the history of Russian attacks and threats coming from the Russian Empire. So we all get it. Yeah, we have our own frictions, but that's for politicians to work out. Between the people, I don't think there are frictions. We understand who the enemy is. And in the first years of the war, it's Poland who has given us most of the support, both humanitarian and military. And look at Poland taking very seriously the threat and improving its defense spending, improving its military, building up defense technology. So I think Poland gets it. There is evidence. Poland is leading the action in Europe, and I think it will continue to be an important leader in terms of the entire security infrastructure. Now, with specific details, I do hope that Poland will step in together with other governments and will provide troops or whatever will be the solution or decision. But if there is a country that I don't have any question about supporting Ukraine, notwithstanding all the issues between farmers and political history and things like that, but truly fundamentally with Ukraine, I think it's Poland.
Tymofiy Mylovanov, advisor to the President of Ukraine, was our guest tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more here on TVP World.